So let's kick off. Welcome to this teacher conversation. We have monthly teacher conversations on within meditation, and the topic for this month's conversation is enjoyment, and we're going to discuss that. So I have with me Ranga and Desiree, and my name is Shundo. I'm hosting this particular one as Hannah is not able to be here this time. So I think to begin, it would be wonderful if Ranga can lead us through a few minutes of meditation so that we can really get ourselves into the right space, the right frame of mind. Welcome, Denise, just joining us. We're really just getting underway now. So I'm going to hand it over to Ranga for a few moments.
Yes, thank you, Shundo, and welcome everyone. So I have a timer here. We'll just sit for about 5 minutes. And we can start by just finding your way to a comfortable posture. One that is upright and also relaxed. And see if you can gently awaken the awareness that's already here and spread it throughout the whole body. What's it feel like to look at the body from within? To feel your presence. See if you can feel the opening of this move, the opening of the heart, opening, softening towards the way it is right now. To use a phrase the Buddha once used, it's like a room with the roof blown out, a roofless building, open, spacious. And as we come out of the sort of hustle of the day, we're stepping out from the thinking mind, the measuring, positioning, strategizing, and we're coming back home. We're leaning into our innate capacity to feel. You already know how to feel. And as we feel deeply, as we sense with soul, feel the joy arise. See if you can lean into the enjoyment. like the food critic trying to taste the beauty in a dish. In the same way, what can you taste here in the body? So as we bring this initial meditation to a close, just one more time, spread your awareness throughout the whole body. Fill your body up with a bright, alive, awake awareness. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. And I'll turn it back to Shundo.
Thank you. Yeah, definitely feeling better in my body for that. Thank you very much. So let's just introduce ourselves as teachers. Actually, Desiree, would you like to start? Just say a little bit about yourself and your background and training.
Everyone, so great to have you in this conversation today. I'm Desiree, one of the teachers at Within. I teach a class on Mondays called Loving What Is. And the inspiration behind that is loving the great. So really finding the opportunities for gratitude, but also how can we find ways to love what's difficult? And my training leading up to this was in the Vipassana meditation tradition. A bit of Zen, and I've been with Within for a couple of years and do a lot of corporate meditation and coaching as well. So in the workplace, in highly stressful environments, and currently in a hospital setting. So get to see the range of human emotions, and again, difficult contexts to bring the spiritual practice in. And I'm excited for this topic today.
Thank you. Yes, I met Desiree in a different meditation context before the pandemic, I remember. We've met a couple of times since then. I've never met Ranga in person, but it's lovely to have you along. Ranga, can you tell us a little bit about your background and training?
Yeah, thank you, Shundo. So my name is Ranga. Excuse me. And I've been practicing meditation since I was pretty young. So for the past 23 years or so. My background comes primarily in Theravada Buddhism, so sort of an ancient school of Buddhism. But I have a great love for many other traditions. You'll hear me probably mention some of the Buddha's teachings as written down in ancient 2,500-year-old texts. And I imagine I'll speak as well from the Thai forest tradition, which was sort of this counter movement in Thailand when a group of monks decided to do what's called Dhutanga practice and go live in the forest. They kind of got sick of the sort of Bangkok city life and really steepened their practice all the way to what's called Nibbana or enlightenment. And I'm very excited to speak about enjoyment today. It's one of my favorite things to consider. And in a lot of ways, it's what keeps me on the meditation cushion. So hopefully that'll suffice as an intro. Thank you, Shundo.
Thank you. Just say for myself, I'm Shundo. I'm a Zen priest, and I trained for 15 years at the San Francisco Zen Center and at Tassajara, the first Zen training monastery outside of Asia, which is in the mountains of California. And these days I teach meditation out in the world and work on Dharma archives and things. And so just, our opening thoughts for this topic, we were just chatting before we came on air, and, I certainly felt, and, when Hannah proposed enjoyment as a topic for this month, it's like, whoa, it's a tough time to be talking about enjoyment with everything going on in the world. But that's, I think, what makes it interesting. And my notion of our practice is that everything, excuse me, everything is always included. So we can't practice just for the good times. We can't practice just for the suffering. We have to practice with absolutely everything that arises. And then within that kind of expanded horizon, I think there is more room for enjoyment to rise up. And I see it mainly as, I think, a flourishing of the life force. That's how it makes the most sense to me. And I might expand on that a little bit later in terms of, my experience of how that's happened and everything. Well, those are my opening thoughts. Ranga, would you like to say how you feel about this topic?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. As I was listening to you, Shundo, it made me think of a story that Jack Kornfield tells. So Jack Kornfield is a Buddhist teacher, but he started out in the Peace Corps and he became a monk under an enlightened master named Ajahn Chah in Thailand. And he said one day he invited his Peace Corps friends over, and it was during a time of unrest and war in, I think, Laos and Thailand and some of the neighboring areas. And he said when the folks first came, they were sort of like really kind of disturbed, and telling Ajahn Chah, this famous teacher, what are you guys doing? There's all this war, and you guys are sitting around meditating silently every day. What's the point, right? But anyway, Jack says that after a few days unfolded, they had a shift in the way that they thought about this. And Ajahn Chah had said, our job is to live from this place of peacefulness, of joy, of timelessness, and that somehow we serve as a reminder that this is possible. He said a lot more, but that came to mind. But I think as another opening remark here, what I really want to say is joy is available. It is an innate quality of the heart, not dependent on any circumstances. It is available to human beings. And in meditation, certainly we can become connoisseurs of joy. So I'll start there.
Thank you. Desiree, would you like to add your opening thoughts?
Yeah. So as you mentioned, we were talking about this, what a time to label a conversation on enjoyment. And I struggled with it too when Hannah first asked me to join the conversation. And I know this is definitely a time where the communities that I'm part of have been suffering quite a bit. I'm sure with most people. And I also thought back to my experience, and over the past month, there has been a lot of suffering and sadness, and a lot of people checking up on each other. And sometimes when they're checking up on me, I'm feeling a lot of pain. And sometimes I might have just gone for a run or had a great meal or did something for myself and I feel good, right? So even in moments of difficulty, you're not often in that difficulty 100% of the time, 100% of the day. And so I think this topic honors that even when there's difficulty, there are moments, many moments, maybe a few moments of joy, and we're allowed to have that and find those, and that doesn't discount the difficulty that exists.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think what that brings up for me is how often the mind wants to go into binaries, like, oh, it's all bad or it's all good. And actually, as we practice, we get to appreciate that, yeah, there's this amount of bad and there's this amount of good. And, we're allowed to, as you say, like I always say we can do away with the shoulds. Like we shouldn't just feel miserable because it's a miserable time. We're allowed to feel these things. Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Yeah.
Now, oh, sorry, Ranga, go ahead.
Yeah, I just thank you, Shundo. Just to kind of piggyback on what Desiree was saying, it is a difficult time, right? I mean, when we consider the world and the pain, the forecast, whether it's the environmental forecast, political forecast, healthcare forecast, there is a great burden in the world today. And I was reading that apparently in terms of the news and internet searches, there's there's the most negativity in both internet searches and news media than ever before in human history. But also when I think about it, and on this chart, by the way, they have World War I, World War II, but it's worse now. And it's really interesting. When I think about the Buddha, he lived in a time when there was all these warring clans, and he was the prince of one of the Sakyans, and constant warfare, in India. So I think it's a delicate thing. How do we honor how we feel? How do we care for what needs to be cared for? But also, how do we find a way to wellness when the world is on fire? Anyway, that's what came to my mind when Desiree was speaking. But Shundo, please go ahead.
Yeah, I think bringing up the example of the historical Buddha is actually, very powerful in that, because he was living in a very turbulent time, and his practice was his example of how to manage with that. And in the Zen tradition, Zen started flourishing in Japan in the 13th century, which is again a time of famine and warfare between the clans and terrible times, and yet the practice flourished. I wanted to invite anyone who's with us here live, if you have questions or comments you'd like to make, and you can either unmute yourselves or put them in the chat if you don't want to speak out. I just want to give some space for you to contribute or ask a question.
Are you opening up the floor?
Yes, Tim, go ahead.
Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Okay, all right. No, I appreciate this. And sometimes the answers are so simple. Sometimes the answer, I've heard it 500 times, but with all that's going on in the world and the death and the negativity, when I was walking down a street near where I live, there was a little 4-year-old going, "Mommy, mommy, look, a bird in the tree. Mommy, mommy, look there's a bug." And it brought me back to the now, right now, of that's our choice. We can be in that mode. I can't do anything about the world. I can be as peaceful as possible, but I have down here to allow a child to lead me, or a child's way of thinking and being. Sometimes it's nice to retreat to, and still be an adult, but just to have a moment carved out of the crazy day of, oh yeah, the leaves are turning these beautiful colors. And that brings joy for the moment. But,
Beautiful.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. I think that's a wonderful example, and that was something I was certainly going to mention, during the course of this conversation, is being, I often think about, sometimes, and I speak for myself, I used to go through the world with blinkers on a lot of the time. I was so wrapped up in my own head, my own self-concern, I wasn't watching what was going on around me, because like just dealing with my own mental dramas. And when I can walk around the world without those blinkers on and actually notice and appreciate what is going on. And I always like to say, like, kids, animals, flowers, and trees are kind of great examples of this. Like, kids are always, almost always present. Animals are always present. Trees are always present. Flowers are always present. And we can be present with those things. And for me, when I'm present with those things, the joy just naturally arises. So thank you for, bringing the example of a 4-year-old who's, he's going through the world like with full attention, full awareness, and full joy, because that is, as Ranga was saying, it's our innate, it's our birthright. We have this innate capacity. And we can always allow that to be present in the midst of everything else. Yeah. Did anyone want to add anything to that?
Go ahead, Sherry.
I have a thought, more of a question for either of you. How does finding a moment of joy in my heart contribute to the global collective? I want to know that it matters, mm-hmm. and it's not selfish. I believe it's important, but I was wondering if any of you might speak to how the energy affects what's going on in the outer when one person has a moment of joy or enjoyment. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, it does. I mean, I can speak to that. I remember going to a middle school a few years ago, talking to a group of, I guess, 7th graders. I'm always a little I didn't grow up with American school grades, so I'm a little confused how old they were, but kind of 10, 11, 12. And we were doing a loving kindness meditation, and the children were all listening along and following and doing it. And then at the end of them, one put up their hand and saying, "So why do we do this? Why would we do a loving kindness meditation?" And I said, "Well, suppose you go out into the hallway after the class and you meet somebody and you smile at them. that might make a difference to their day. Maybe they feel a little bit better, and maybe they then smile at somebody, and and it might ripple out. The difference between going out and smiling at somebody and going outside and scowling at them, it may be very small in global terms, but it's a ripple effect. And my experience as a teacher certainly is that we never know how wide that ripple goes. I have people coming back to me and saying, "Oh, that thing you said to me 10 years ago, like I still think about that." And it's like, I said that? Wow. So, whatever we do, we can't be sure what the effect is, but it does have an effect. It's never just a selfish thing, because we're never disconnected from the rest of the world. The rest of the world is always impacted by our demeanor, in the same way that Tim was impacted by the 4-year-old. The 4-year-old doesn't know that we're talking about her right now, but we are. She's impacted this whole conversation and brought that energy into this space, and then we take it out into whatever space we're in. And so it's this, this fundamental principle of interconnection that is the foundation of our practice, that allows, we don't know, but we trust that it's true. And it may be, Buddha didn't know that we'd be talking about him 2,500 years on, but he just did what he did, and look at us now.
I love that, Shundo, and I'll just add upon that. When you do a loving kindness practice, wishing other people well, wishing yourself well, you end up feeling better. You might remember, wow, I really care for this person in my life. Let me reach out to them, right? So you have these feelings, but these feelings can get channeled into actions, right? So the action that you take when you're coming from a place of stress might be very different from the action you take when you're coming from a place of joy and love, and you want to share that and spread that. So that's one way I see it making a difference. I also think when things are happening on a national or global scale that are difficult and that we don't have control over, I think it's easy to look at that and be overwhelmed and say we can't do anything. But I look at the micro scale, what can we do? So right now there is a lot of tension, a lot of misunderstanding, a lot of mistrust among a lot of people. And I look at my own life, right? So how can I reduce the mistrust, increase the understanding? So when I'm coming from a place of joy and spaciousness, I'm better able to look at those micro moments and say, wow, how can I contribute here and now? So I think your inner context actually has a huge bearing on what you end up doing, and then the micro things that actually change things on a global scale if everyone does them.
Yeah. I really appreciate both responses there. I just want to add, from my perspective, Shari, there is nothing you could do that would be more productive, more helpful, more of a blessing to the world than for you to find joy and peace within your own heart. I really feel that. And I think this is a really important aspect in meditation. For many of us, we need to connect our personal practice with the world in this way. Before the class, Shundo was mentioning a sort of practice he has where he dedicates the merit from teachings with all beings, which is a Buddhist practice that I really like. And that's one way to do it. So we might see that later. But I'll say a little bit more. Jack Kornfield, he says something I really like. He said, no amount of nanotechnology, healthcare technology, cryptocurrency, fintech, no amount of technology can cure hunger or greed, war, destruction, but mindfulness can. And so we have to start here in our own hearts. How did these things happen? How does the environmental crisis happen? It happens partially because of a lack of appreciation that we as a people have towards the earth. How does war start? A lack of love, ill will, right? So I think this tending to the heart is extremely productive, but sometimes we just need to encourage ourselves. And I think part of the question that we have here is like, is it appropriate to feel joy when there's so much pain in the world? And I'm curious to hear what the other teachers have to say, but from my part, it is appropriate. Another way of thinking about your question, Shari, is if you did not feel peace in your heart, if you felt worry, anxiety, fear, how would that affect the world? And we know what it's like to enter a room when someone is going through that, when someone is very angry or very scared. There's an energetic effect that we have on one another. But when we walk into a room and someone is well, really well, that also has an effect. So yeah, please continue your practice. It is helping.
Thank you.
Yeah, often, Ranga, just to follow on your example, I usually visualize that not as walking into a room, but walking down the street. When you're walking down Market Street in San Francisco, for example, you can always tell, at a distance, somebody who's having a really tough time, having a really hard day, and whose energy is, kind of little frazzled. And I think we're all more energetically sensitive to this stuff than we often think we are. And, my experience is also that if we can feel safe walking down the street with a smile on our face, we do kind of send that wave out with us. And I've definitely had experiences, where smiling at somebody and them smiling back at me, it just opens up the whole day. And again, it doesn't stop, there being suffering around, but it allows for, a flourishing of goodness. And again, the ripple effect of that isn't something that we can control, but we can just keep practicing that. We can keep modeling that behavior. And I think as practitioners, certainly when I first came to the Zen Center, it was everyone's demeanor, everyone's kind, considerate demeanor that kind of encouraged me to keep practicing. It's like, oh, I kind of want to grow up to be like these people. They're not reactive. They're not, grumpy all the time. They were grumpy sometimes, but, you could see that there was a mindful approach to how they were living their lives. And so as we mature as practitioners, we get to model that behavior and see it ripple out. And so, in terms of, when the world is having a hard time, I see a lot of people getting incredibly stressed and almost burnt out on how much they feel they have to do. And, that wish to act, that wish to do something when the challenges are so vast is, or can get very discouraging. And there's always a balance we need to make when we're kind of called to action or called to justice, not to just throw ourselves in and burn ourselves out completely. And so, from a practitioner's point of view, we balance, if we can, that wish for justice, that wish for everything to be well, with a nurturing of that kind of flame of joy and happiness and peace that can help sustain the energy that we use for these things. And some people are going to be more energetic and more active, and some people are going to be kind of more on the nurturing side. So I think that's how I'm looking at this situation, as as we've looked at other situations in the last few years, and that have been very challenging too.
Yeah, I think what's coming up for me, a combination, I think of, Shundo, what you said, and Ranga, what you said is, I think often we're looking for permission to feel joy during these times, but what I'm hearing both of you say is, it's not even permission, it's necessary. It's doing good for the world. It's doing good for ourselves to feel joy. And I feel like that's just can be transformational from, is it okay, to no, this is the work. This is necessary to be able to feel joy.
Yes.
Does anyone else have a question who's here they would like to ask or comment?
Well, I have one, and it's a matter of balance. I had a mother who was always so much into joy and in the moment and doing fun things. My dad was very strict. But that's what I have to balance now, because I enjoy enjoying things and doing things that aren't work. So work, I have to go into the grown-up part of it and the responsibility and be sure I have the work. So that balance between work and joy, searching for joy, is sometimes I really have to push myself. It takes a discipline to do something that's not fully joyful.
Uh-huh.
Or change the mindset about what I'm doing. Yeah, this is the most joyous thing that I can do is work. Yay.
I was going to start suggesting that, Tim. Thank you for getting there before me, because I know we are often encouraged to to think about how we think about things. Like, oh, I love watching movies, or I love going out for a walk, but I hate going to work. And it's like, well, how can you make your work something that is not just something to endure, but something to allow you to flourish even. And again, I think the mindful approach, and I'm going to suggest the open-mindedness. If we go into a situation, oh, this is the thing I hate doing, ugh, then we're never going to not hate doing it. But if we can find, and I think this is where my practice has helped me an awful lot, if we can find that beginner's mind. I was just talking with a group in England, about what we call beginner's mind in Zen, which is like you go into something and you don't lead with your expectations, you don't lead with your opinions, you don't lead with your stories and values about what that is. You have all these things floating about in your head, but how is it to put those aside and say, what is this right now? Oh, okay, I have to make a work call, or I have to go to this meeting. And instead of thinking, oh, it's a meeting, gosh, can you really open up that heart space, open up that this is how I feel in the moment. Now, it might not make it 100% joyful, but it does, I think, expand the possibilities for joy. And I know in my own upbringing, I had so many fixed ideas about this is what I think about this, and this is what I think about that. And practice has really shown me that, no, you can shake a lot of that stuff out. It might still be that, but you're not leading with that. And when we don't lead with those kind of prior judgments that we have about something, that our mind is, so ready to come up with all those prior judgments, then what is left, or what arises, and I think there's much more opportunity for joy in that kind of mindset.
Yeah. I'm thinking about, I hear you on sometimes not liking aspects of work, and and the framing that I tried to use with work, especially. We had an experience at the hospital where there were strikes, national strikes, and it was all hands on deck. Some of my friends were assigned janitorial duty. I had no idea what I was going to be assigned. Some people had 12-hour shifts, some people longer than that. And so the night before, I'm feeling all this resistance and dread. And the approach that I take in moments of that is, how can this aid me in my spiritual growth? Right? Because I find that I don't grow when things are, I think I grow less when things are great or everything's going my way. I grow a lot when I'm put into positions where there's resistance, where there's judgment, where there's expectation. So, I wonder if that can be an additional lens that you apply when there's something you don't want to do or questioning coming up. It's, how can this aid me in my spiritual growth, right? Is it expanding my heart in some way, my compassion in some way for other people? Is it making me aware of my blind spots and my triggers? There's just so much to play with. And I found that prior to taking this job 6 months ago, I was doing coaching and meditation full time. I was really worried to go into a hospital setting where everyone is burned out and it's really tough. And I was worried that would get in the way of my enjoyment in my practice, but actually it's enhanced it, right? It's enhanced it because I feel like I'm growing more spiritually than I would have if everything felt like it was in my control, in my head and everything that I want. And it also makes the moments outside of it sweeter, right? Or the times where things do feel good, really great. So I think it provides, again, I don't want to gaslight you if the work that you do is really bad or you feel like it's not contributing, because there are situations where the work isn't conducive to spiritual growth. But sometimes there's something there to play around with that we might not have noticed. That's not in our job description, but is more in our spiritual path.
I hope you found that helpful advice. I don't know if you have anything to add, Ranga, but when you were talking, Desiree, I was thinking back to doing the many intensive, retreats that we did at the monastery when I was living there. And, one of the questions we have, to chew on is, what are some practical tips or techniques to increase enjoyment in meditation practice? And, my experience of a lot of those extended retreats that I was doing is that it was just painful. It was miserable. I didn't enjoy doing them at all. But when I came out after lunch and sat in the garden and watched a bee, buzzing around a flower, life was just incredible, and it's like, oh, well, I guess there's some benefit here. Maybe I don't enjoy that particular moment of it, but wow, I can feel the benefit. I've never, enjoyed watching a bee buzzing around a flower so much before. But do either of you, Ranga or Desiree, have tips about enjoying or increasing your enjoyment of meditation practice?
Yeah, I love the story about the bee. Yeah, I think the first thing I want to say here is joy it's not an on-off switch. It's not that we're feeling joy and we're not feeling joy. It's a spectrum. And it gets very deep, very refined, very subtle. So it's like with your question, just to say that joy can deepen to different dimensions of being. I want to say, like, the joy that's available to a human being is beyond what we think is available to a human being. In the Buddha's teachings, he talked about, in Buddhist cosmology, in Theravada Buddhism, they talk about heavenly realms. So it's sort of like heaven in a lot of religions, but with some differences. It's not considered a final destination, but it's a place where you can be born in, right? And whether or not you believe that, what he says is that in meditation, we can come to realms of experience that are like these heavenly abodes. We can learn to dwell in heavenly perception. And he calls these stages or levels, they're called jhanas, or they're called samadhi, but he calls them perception attainments, perceptual skills. So part of what we're doing in meditation is we're playing with perception. So this idea that here we are meditating, and then there's this world, and the world is full of war and destruction and famine. That's not really how the Buddha saw it after his enlightenment. What he awakened to is this idea of shunyata, or emptiness, that there is nothing inherent in any situation that determines how we feel. There is nothing inherent in any situation, in any phenomena, that determines how we feel, that determines its meaning or its value. So as meditators, we learn how to find our seat in this mystery and to find our way to whatever quality we're inclined to find. And joy is certainly one of them. So I should probably answer the question here. In terms of tips and techniques, the body is a natural home for our awareness. And the body, Ajahn Mun, another teacher from Thailand, he said, the body is a cave of wonders. We don't realize how much bliss is here in the body. And, I'm Sri Lankan Buddhist, and I grew up in a very monastic sort of Buddhist view of things. And, at first, and I think for a lot of Buddhists, it can feel like there's nothing sexy about this. There's no fun, there's no pleasure. This is a life of celibacy, and you shave your head, and you can't own money and nothing. But the Buddha said, I teach pleasure. He found a pleasure that he considered higher than the pleasure available elsewhere. In fact, nikama, or renunciation, is, in my view, and in one of my teachers, Rob Brevea's view, renunciation is letting go of lower pleasures in favor of higher pleasures. So in meditation, if you spread your awareness to the body and you keep this body as your foundation, no matter what you're doing, keep one eye open on the body, what you will start to see is that joy will arise in the body, not dependent on anything external. It comes naturally when the body and the mind are not being harassed by the things that normally harass us. So my number one tip to people, and I have to tell you, this takes time. You can't just do it once and then stop, if you dedicated your life to this and experienced these other dimensions of joy only once, if only for an hour, it would be a life worth living, in my mind. So yeah, thank you, Shundo.
Okay, that was wonderfully set out and articulated. Thank you. Desiree, would you like to follow that with your thoughts on?
I don't know if I can follow that, but I think what's helped me is locating the simple joys that we don't often think about. I think we're so used to chasing the massive joys, like the big promotion, the vacation, the sparkly, shiny object, whatever it is. And for me, what meditation does is I get to notice the most subtle of joys, right? So maybe it's the feeling of peacefulness and relaxation in your body and mind for a second, right? Maybe you're meditating with a blanket around you and it's the warmth of the blanket holding you. I think the more we can tune into those subtle joys, the more we can find all the joy that's around us. It doesn't have to be huge, and it doesn't have to be expensive, and it doesn't have to be a one-time thing, right? Having our morning coffee and really tasting it instead of rushing is joy, and doing it mindfully, right? Feeling the sunshine on our bodies is joy. And I know you asked specifically about meditation, but I think through the day, if we really apply mindfulness to these moments, we can find these really subtle, delicious joys that exist that we don't otherwise notice, that we take for granted. And I think that's helped me. And then when you come back to your practice and you're meditating, you can just notice all those tiny little joys across your body, or the fact that you don't have to rush to something. You don't have to plan for something. You don't have to worry about something. All of that is peace and joy in the moment for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd very much agree with that. The practice of mindful attention, and mindfulness of our perceptions while we're sitting, just really naturally feeds into taking that out into the rest of our lives. And I remember a very specific experience. I'd been riding my bike across the Golden Gate Bridge, for some time after I moved to San Francisco and was living at the Zen Center. And then just one morning, I remember, the sun was shining and it was casting a shadow of the bridge onto the hills, and just like that vividness, and again, it was, being out in the sun, it felt great, it was a lovely morning, but just the vividness that came with that, I was like, wow, I've done this dozens of times, but now I'm just really feeling it. So that's a visual I always remember of, like, the world is constantly offering us moments of joy like that, and can we notice them, or do we have our blinkers on? And for me, meditation is about taking off those blinkers, the self-concern, the being wrapped up in the future and the past, just being present with exactly what's arising. And I did say beforehand that I would tell a Zen story, so I want to tell a Zen story before we run out of time. It's quite a famous Zen story, and it starts with a person being chased by a tiger. Which in the part of the world where Buddhism first flourished, was not an implausible scenario. It was possible to get chased by a tiger. And, obviously he's scared and running for his life. I'm going to make him a he in this case. And ends up falling over the edge of a cliff and grabs hold of a plant and realizes that if he lets go of the plant, he has a tremendously long way to fall and is unlikely to survive the fall. But he notices, as he's grabbing hold of the plant, with the tiger gnarling above him and the full below him, there's a strawberry right there. So he takes the strawberry and puts it in his mouth and says, delicious. And so, it's a great story in terms of, like, there is suffering all around us. We're indubitably going to die at one time or another, even if we don't like to think about that very much. And, much of the world is consumed by suffering, and there's pain and misery and all kinds of things. But right now, in this very moment, when there is a strawberry available, or even if there's not a strawberry available, can you taste that strawberry? Can you appreciate the moment of beauty that is actually there around you? As we've been talking about in this conversation, like, it's never just one thing or another. We always have the opportunity in the increasingly subtle awareness of what is going on around us to find the joy that can sustain us.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Ranga.
beautiful. No, I just want to say it's cool, like when you're around meditation teachers or practitioners, to just hear where they sense joy, right? It's all around us. And the strawberry story, and as Desiree was saying, with just a sip of coffee, and or the bike, biking on the bridge, and these may sound like tiny fleeting moments of joy, but you can see for a meditator, these become reservoirs, and we can draw from that well. So yeah, thank you both for sharing.
Mm-hmm. And I do remember when I was first living at the monastery, which is, in this beautiful idyllic place way out in the mountains, I would come back to San Francisco, and all I would see in the city was kind of like dirt and suffering, and I just like, oh, let me get back to the monastery again. It's nice out there. But then over the years, I got to appreciate that, yes, there is dirt and suffering, and there's a lot of other stuff there. And so that, now has led to my practice. Like when I walk down the street, can I smile at, the people that aren't immediately threatening me? Can I find those moments of connection and joy? Can I appreciate the 4-year-old who's, absorbed in everything around her? And so, this is definitely my experience is that practice does open up those possibilities, those reservoirs. Yeah. So I know we have to wrap up in a little bit because there is a class at 5 o'clock. So I wonder if there's any last questions or comments from anyone who's here. Otherwise, we'll get into closing mode.
If I could, just a brief thought. I was thinking before this today of a holistic approach. We're talking about the reservoir inside and the moments of joy. But I get a lot of guidance from Dr. Paskowitz, who's no longer here, but he talked about having excellent health. And it was diet, exercise, rest, relaxation, and attitudes of mind. Yeah. And I say, along with meditation, but there's got to be some harmony elsewhere. Otherwise, there's indigestion, or I'm way too fat now, or, to bring it all to a wonderful, beautiful joy that it's firing on all cylinders, so to speak. But,
yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's interesting. From a Taoist perspective, the body and the health of the body is very much aligned with the mind, right? And I find for some people it's really, really important to learn how to attend to one's health, and for me that was certainly the case. And that brings me to maybe another brief closing point. Joy is conditional. I do think it's possible to find a kind of quote unquote joy that is not conditioned, but I would call that nibbana, nirvana, enlightenment. It's not really joy, it's something beyond. But joy as we know it is a conditioned phenomena, meaning that it's dependent on other phenomena. So we can get really good at this, guys. We can get good at understanding what conditions bring the fruit of joy in our lives. All we have to do is pay attention. And all the teachers here have talked about mindfulness in different ways, and that's really one of the key ingredients. And mindfulness is very close to what I call chitta sensitivity. It's heart sensitivity. In meditation, we learn to be sensitive to our own hearts, to be attuned to how we feel, to what is here. And that allows us to actually notice what gives rise to the condition of joy. And we talked about some of those conditions today, but I'll end there.
And I'll just add one thing to that, Ranga, is that is not a isolating phenomenon. Like, it's never a self-isolating, because when we do this for ourselves, we're doing it with everybody else as well, and that's always true. So as we've talked about, that will impact others too. Thank you. Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Desiree, would you like to share a closing thought, maybe?
Sure. Yeah, maybe I'll just build on what Tim said, and thank you for bringing that up. I see meditation as like a part of a wellness cocktail, but just a part for me. It's not all of it. Exercise, I call it my natural antidepressant, and it works like a charm, right? There are things I think meditation is great, and I think it's up to us to find the other things that create the wellness, create the joy for our lives, create this sense of stability and health and peace. So yeah, so I just appreciate you acknowledging that. I don't think it has to be, this is the way and the only way. It's like, this is a piece of it. And then what are the other pieces that complete it for you?
And we talked about dedicating the merit. Desiree, how would you like to dedicate the merit of this conversation?
Yeah, when you first brought that up, I just thought anyone who's experiencing suffering right now.
Exactly. Thank you. It's wonderful. So we don't do this practice for our own benefit. In the Buddhist tradition, there is a bodhisattva who works for everyone else's liberation before their own. And we do this practice so that other beings, everybody else gets to experience joy. So whatever benefit, whatever merit we've accrued from this wonderful conversation, we dedicate to everyone who is suffering, which is many, many people out in the world. But thank you for coming to this. Thank you for speaking. Thank you for articulating. Thank you for asking questions. Thank you for sharing the experience. Thank you for sharing the joy. It's wonderful to be with you. Thanks for being part of the Within community, which is, helping and sustaining many, many people as you go through our busy lives. Okay, take good care, and hopefully we'll see each other soon.
Thank you all.